statistically speaking, when humans are placed in a sudden, really high-stakes crisis, the absolute hardest choice for our brains to make is to just do absolutely nothing.
Without a doubt, yeah.
I mean, think about it. Our biology basically screams at us to act. When the pressure is immense and the walls are closing in, our survival instinct demands motion.
Right. Even if that motion actively destroys us.
Exactly. We fire off that, career-ending angry email, or we sell our investments at the absolute bottom of the market. We force a backup plan to make that internal panic stop.
Yeah, it's actually a documented psychological phenomenon. It's known as action bias.
Action bias.
Yeah. So when faced with ambiguity or danger, human beings have this overwhelming urge to intervene. We basically equate stillness with death.
Wow.
But the problem, is that in complex situations, moving without clarity doesn't actually save you. It just ensures you hit the wall at a much higher velocity.
And that biological trap, right, that urge to hit the gas when we should definitely be hitting the brakes, that is exactly what we're digging into today. So, welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
We are exploring a super fascinating ancient text today, specifically the 30th chapter of the book of Isaiah. But we're looking at this ancient manuscript through a very specific lens.
Right, as a practical framework.
Exactly. A profound framework for modern human psychology, decision-making under severe pressure, and ultimately, how we can fundamentally strengthen our trust and relationship with God.
And I think the durability of this text is really what makes it so compelling. I mean, the specific geopolitical players have obviously changed over the millennia, but the underlying neurological and spiritual traps, they are exactly identical.
Yeah, totally.
We are essentially studying an ancient blueprint of our own modern anxiety.
So what does this all mean? Like, to extract the wisdom here, we kind of have to drop ourselves into the historical pressure cooker that this text was written in.
Right, context is everything.
Right. Because this isn't just some mild inconvenience that the people of Israel are facing. It is an absolute masterclass in geopolitical terror. Let me just set the scene for you quickly, because understanding the threat really changes how you view their reaction.
Yeah, it was a nightmare scenario.
It was. The Assyrian Empire is marching toward them. And the Assyrians weren't just, a large army. They were the apex predators of the ancient world.
Oh, absolutely brutal.
Yeah, they used cutting-edge siege warfare and just absolute psychological terror. I'm talking flaying people alive, leveling entire cities. It was a literal existential apocalyptic threat.
They were the undisputed superpower. I mean, when the Assyrian war machine targeted your city, the rational response was just absolute, unadulterated terror.
Right.
So the people of Israel are watching the storm gather, and their collective amygdala-like, the fear center of the brain, it just completely hijacks their decision-making process.
Which is that action bias you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. So instead of pausing and seeking the divine guidance they were strictly instructed to rely on, they scramble. They go for a rushed political and military alliance with Egypt.
Which was the exact opposite of what their covenant with God required.
Yeah.
I mean, they are trying to solve a deeply spiritual crisis with a frantic, political patch.
Yeah, quick fix.
And the lengths they go to are just objectively absurd. The text actually describes them packing up all their national wealth, their riches, and loading them onto the backs of young donkeys and camels.
Oh, yeah, to trek across the Negev desert.
Right. And this isn't some casual road trip.
Mm-hmm.
The text specifically highlights the environment as this land of trouble and anguish, populated by lions and vipers and fiery flying serpents.
It's terrifying.
Seriously, they are dragging their gold through a literal gauntlet of deadly predators just to buy a deeply flawed solution from Pharaoh.
Well, what's fascinating here is the ultimate futility of this entire frantic operation. I mean, God declares through the prophet Isaiah that the Egyptians will help in vain and to no purpose.
Wow, so it was all for nothing.
Completely. The prophecy actually states that taking shelter in the shadow of Egypt will only bring them shame and confusion. In their absolute panic, speed basically replaced wisdom.
Yeah.
We see this constant pattern, Most massive failures don't happen because people did nothing during a crisis. They fail because they moved with intense urgency in the completely wrong direction.
Wait, hold on. I get the spiritual theory behind that, but I feel like I have to play devil's advocate for human nature here just for a second.
Sure, go for it.
The instinct to act is just so deep. Like if you watch someone drowning, they don't just calmly tread water. They flail. They panic.
Right. It's pure panic.
They literally push their own rescuer underwater just to get a single breath of air. I mean, it's a fatal flaw, but it feels like sheer survival in the moment. So why are we so deeply wired to choose a terrible solution like to drown our own rescuer just because it feels like we are doing something?
Well, it's because taking immediate action acts as a temporary anesthetic
Oh, interesting. Anesthetic for what?
for the psychological agony of uncertainty. When you're drowning, your brain literally cannot process long-term strategy. It only processes the next 3 seconds.
Right, just get air.
Exactly. So by taking an action, literally any action, we experience a brief illusion of control. We confuse urgency with clarity.
Wow.
But when you form an alliance with your own personal Egypt-like, whatever that quick fix wrong solution is for you, you aren't actually solving the root problem. You're just mortgaging your future to briefly lower your blood pressure today.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, the Egyptian army was never going to save them, but making the deal made Israel feel productive for a few weeks.
And that frantic need to feel productive is directly tied to our absolute refusal to deal with the actual problem.
Yeah.
Like, we rush toward these bad surface-level solutions because looking at the root cause of our crisis is terrifying.
It really is.
And the text vividly describes this avoidance. It calls the people rebellious, stating they actively refuse to hear the law of the Lord. They literally go to the prophets, the seers, and tell them, "See not."
You stop looking.
Exactly. They say, "Prophesy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits." I mean, they are looking the truth right in the face and saying, "Please lie to me."
They are actively constructing their own echo chamber. It's actually a brilliant, ancient depiction of cognitive dissonance.
Oh, how so?
Well, when the truth demands that we change our behavior or admit that our current strategy is completely failing, our ego goes into overdrive to protect itself. We filter out the hard data.
Right. We only listen to what feels good.
Exactly. We surround ourselves with voices that tell us our flawed plans are actually brilliant. But the text makes a really crucial point here. Curating your reality does not change your reality.
Yeah, and the imagery Isaiah uses for the consequence of that avoidance is incredible. He warns that because they trust in oppression and basically demand comfortable lies, their sudden collapse will be like a swelling high wall.
That's such a striking metaphor.
It really is. Let's unpack the physics of that for a second. Think about a massive concrete retaining wall holding back thousands of pounds of earth and water. When hydrostatic pressure builds up behind it because there's no drainage, the wall starts to bow outward. It swells. Now, to the naked eye, the wall is still standing. It looks totally solid.
Right, from the outside, everything seems fine.
But internally, the rebar is snapping. And then, in a single millisecond, it doesn't just crack, it catastrophically vaporizes.
And that is the exact mechanism of living on smooth things. You build your life, your career, or your crisis response on a foundation of comforting lies.
Yeah.
And the hydrostatic pressure of reality just keeps building.
Oof. Yeah.
You think you're getting away with it because the wall is technically still upright today? But the text says when that swelling wall finally goes, it shatters like a potter's vessel.
Complete destruction.
Exactly. It breaks into so many tiny fragments that you can't even find a shard big enough to scoop a little water from a pit or take a single coal of fire from a hearth. Absolute unrecoverable destruction.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you really do see this avoidance mechanism everywhere. It's exactly like driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour and suddenly hearing a horrific metallic grinding noise coming from your car's transmission.
Oh, the worst sound.
The worst.
Yeah.
And you know it's bad. You know it means a massive repair bill. But instead of pulling over and facing the reality of the situation, you just reach over and crank the car radio all the way up to max volume.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. You drown out the grinding with music, you listen to the smooth things on the radio and pretend your car is fine for another 10 miles, but eventually that transmission is going to explode right underneath you. Growth and actual stability require brutal honesty.
And if you refuse to listen to that grinding noise, the consequences just compound. The text also warns that those who try to flee their problems on swift horses will simply be pursued by enemies who are even swifter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it says 1,000 will flee at the rebuke of just one person until they are left totally isolated, like a single beacon on the top of a mountain. Running from the truth doesn't leave the truth behind. It just guarantees the truth will hunt you down.
So, if forcing backup plans, like running to Egypt and cranking up the radio to listen to smooth things, both lead to a shattered wall,
Yeah.
what is the actual mechanism for surviving the pressure?
Right, what's the alternative?
Yeah. The text does provide a solution, but I have to warn you, it flies in the face of literally every modern instinct we have.
It really is a profound paradigm-shifting instruction.
The turning point of the entire 30th chapter actually revolves around this one verse. God tells them, "In returning and rest shall ye be saved. In quietness and in confidence shall be your strength."
Quietness and confidence.
Wait, hold on. I get the spiritual theory behind quietness and confidence, but practically speaking, if my business is going bankrupt tomorrow, or if a literal army of Assyrians is marching toward my city, sitting still feels indistinguishable from just giving up.
Right, it feels passive.
Exactly. How is that not just spiritualizing procrastination? How does doing nothing solve a dynamic, fast-moving crisis?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to realize that restraint is actually an incredibly high-level executive function.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What this text is teaching is that real strength isn't frantic, uncoordinated action. Restraint is the ability to override the panic response of your amygdala. When you choose not to react immediately, you are giving your prefrontal cortex, the logical, strategic part of your brain, time to actually assess the board.
Okay, that makes sense neurologically.
Right. But more importantly, from a spiritual perspective, this is the pivotal moment where trust is operationalized.
So by pausing, you essentially stop generating the chaotic noise of your own flawed solution.
Exactly. You are actively shutting down the machinery of panic. It requires immense vulnerability to look at the approaching army and say, I am not going to run to my Egypt. I am going to hold my position.
Wow.
And part of holding that position is ruthlessly dismantling the false safety nets you used to rely on.
And the text is incredibly stark about that dismantling process.
Mm.
It doesn't just say to gently, set your bad habits aside.
Oh, no, not at all.
It instructs the people to completely defile their graven images. The idols of silver and the molten images of gold that they've spent their whole lives worshiping and trusting in for protection. The text says to cast them away like a menstruous cloth and to verbally command those idols, get thee hence. That is visceral, purposely offensive language.
It's designed to evoke absolute disgust for the things we falsely rely on. Letting go of wrong dependencies isn't just some polite pivot. It is a necessary psychological break.
Right.
You have to look at your old coping mechanisms, the quick fixes you always run to, and recognize them as fundamentally useless and defiled. You have to outgrow the illusion that your personal idols can save you in order to create the space required for genuine divine alignment.
Okay, so once you stripped away the noise and stopped the frantic running and thrown your false idols in the garbage, your brain suddenly has the quiet bandwidth it needs to actually listen. But what happens next? The text makes it pretty clear that God's response isn't some magic wand that instantly makes the crisis comfortable.
Not at all. Realignment requires facing the reality you've been avoiding, and that process is inherently painful.
Yeah, the text says, the Lord will give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. Even when you stop running and finally trust Him, correction is uncomfortable.
It's hard to swallow.
Literally.
Yeah.
You have to eat the reality of your past mistakes. You might have to chew on the bread of adversity for a while to fully detox from the smooth things you've been addicted to.
That is such a vital grounding point. You really have to accept that short-term discomfort is the entry fee for long-term stability. Facing reality hurts, but it heals.
Yeah.
And the text promises that while you are eating that bread of adversity, your teachers will no longer be hidden in a corner. Your eyes will finally see the guidance you've been missing.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the metaphor the text uses for this guidance is just brilliant. It promises, thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, this is the way, walk ye in it, when ye turn to the right hand and when ye turn to the left.
It's so specific.
Right. Think about how a modern GPS navigation system works. If you are panic driving, like swerving through heavy traffic at 90 miles an hour, screaming at the cars around you, gripping the steering wheel until your knuckles are white, you literally cannot perceive the calm voice of the GPS telling you your exit is coming up.
You're just too distracted.
Exactly. The signal is broadcasting, but your internal noise is completely drowning it out.
You are moving too fast to receive course correction.
But the second you pull the car over, put it in park, and practice that quietness and confidence, suddenly that voice is perfectly clear. This is the way. Walk ye in it. Turn right here. Turn left here. The guidance was always available. You were just too loud to hear it.
I love that analogy. The direction exists, but it requires our focused attention. And what this chapter promises is that when we endure the discomfort of reality and finally listen to that voice, the restoration that follows is breathtaking.
It really is.
The ancient imagery Isaiah uses to describe this post-alignment abundance is incredibly specific and rich.
Yeah, it describes an ecosystem totally overflowing with life. Once they listen, God gives rain for the seeds. The bread of the earth becomes fat and plenteous. Their cattle feed in massive pastures.
It's a complete turnaround.
And here is an amazing detail. It says, even the oxen and young donkeys that worked the ground will eat clean, winnowed provender. Let's explain that real quick, because winnowing is the laborious process of separating the valuable wheat from the useless chaff, right?
Right, which was usually reserved strictly for human food.
Exactly. The text is saying the abundance will be so extreme that even the work animals will be eating premium, purified grain.
It is a profound picture of systemic healing. When the spiritual foundation is finally corrected, the entire ecosystem thrives. Better inputs lead to better outcomes.
So true.
It goes on to say there will be rivers and streams of waters on every high mountain, and that the light of the moon will be as bright as the sun, with the sun shining sevenfold. This all happens in the day the Lord binds up the breach of his people. He is actively waiting to be gracious to us, but we have to maintain a posture of quiet trust to receive it.
And what about the Assyrian army? Because while God is restoring his people who finally chose to sit still, he simultaneously deals with the actual threat. The true source of their panic doesn't just fade away, it is actively dismantled.
Oh, violently dismantled.
Yeah, the text describes this terrifying cosmic judgment coming down upon Assyria. It says, the name of the Lord comes from afar, burning with anger, his breath like an overflowing stream reaching up to the neck.
It is an overwhelming display of divine sovereignty.
It says, the Assyrian will be beaten down through the voice of the Lord, accompanied by fire, a stream of brimstone, scattering tempest, and hailstones. But here is the wildest part of the description. It says, this apocalyptic judgment will happen with the sound of tabrets and harps.
Right, the instruments.
Yeah, tabrets are basically ancient tambourines. It is a completely bizarre, counterintuitive image. God is fighting the ultimate war, and the soundtrack is party instruments. It highlights the absolute sheer dominance of the victory. There is no struggle, just a celebration.
Which really brings the entire chapter full circle. The Assyrian military machine was a genuine, terrifying threat, but Israel's frantic attempt to save themselves through a corrupt alliance with Egypt was actually an even greater threat to their spiritual survival.
Wow.
God is effectively showing them, I can easily handle the Assyrians with hailstones and tambourines. Your only job is to handle your trust in me.
Wow. What an incredible psychological and spiritual framework this chapter provides. Let's summarize our journey through this deep dive today.
Good.
We started by examining our biological action bias. When we are under suffocating pressure, our absolute baseline instinct is to rush decisions, to rely on our own flawed backup plans for a quick fix, and to demand comforting lies over the brutal realities of our situation.
But as we explored with the swelling wall metaphor, relying on those smooth things only guarantees a catastrophic, shattering collapse.
Exactly. Real strength and the deepening of our trust with God doesn't come from frantic, panicked action. It comes from the highly disciplined skill of restraint. It comes from quiet confidence. It comes from throwing away our false safety nets, enduring the bread of adversity, and silencing our internal chaos so we can finally hear that steady voice behind us telling us the exact right way to walk.
This raises an important question for anyone listening today. I mean, we analyze the historical mistakes of Israel and Egypt, and it feels like an ancient history lesson. But we execute this exact same psychology every single day in our careers, our relationships, and our faith.
Oh, 100%.
Look critically at your own life. Where are the areas right now where you are manufacturing frantic movement simply because you are terrified of the vulnerability required to sit in quiet confidence?
You just cannot outrun the truth, and rushing toward a bad solution will only compound your crisis. It leaves you with this unsettling yet vital thought to ponder. If God's voice is the GPS guiding you out of your current crisis, but that voice can only be perceived in quietness, how much of your current suffering is simply because you were too loud to be rescued? And as you face the pressure in your life this week, how will you apply this information in your life?